Lesson 1. Glory, the real issue. Lucifer's pride is not the genesis of the epic story in which we find ourselves. God's glory is. We must begin there to accurately understand the nature of the war we live in and the accompanying daily battles. Isaiah 14:12-15. How you have fallen from heaven, O star of the morning, son of the dawn! You have been cut down to the earth, you who have weakened the nations. But you said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven, and I will raise my throne above the stars of God, and I will sit on the mount of assembly in the recesses of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, and I will make myself like the Most High. Ezekiel 28:12-17. You had the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God, and every precious stone was your covering, the ruby, the topaz, and the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, and the jasper, the lapis lazuli, the turquoise, and the emerald, and the gold. The workmanship of your settings and sockets was in you. On the day that you were created, they were prepared. You were the anointed cherub who covers, and I placed you there. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked in the midst of the stones of fire. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created until unrighteousness was found in you. By the abundance of your trade you were internally filled with violence, and you sinned. Therefore I have cast you as profane from the mountain of God, and I have destroyed you, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. Your heart was lifted up because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom by reason of your splendor. John 1:1-3. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and all things came into being through him, and apart from him nothing came into being that has come into being. Jesus prayed to the Father in John 17:21-22 that they all may be one, as thou, Father, art in me and I in thee, that they also may be one in us, that the world may believe that thou hast sent me. And the glory which thou gavest me I have given them, that they may be one, even as we are one. This has to be one of the most incredible declarations made by Christ in the whole of Scripture, and yet it is one of the most overlooked. He said to his Father that the glory which thou gavest me I have given them. The glory that the Father gave Jesus has now been given to the Christian. Christ said in John 17:10, all mine are thine, and thine are mine, and I am glorified in them. So, if we go back to the Isaiah passage, there are 5 I wills. Though glory was the provoking temptation for Lucifer, Lucifer's own will was the problem. His own will is what led to his downfall. How is that any different than us? In fact, Robert Morris, the senior pastor of the Gateway Church in Southlake, Texas, provocatively suggests that we are told we have an Adamic nature by theologians. The original sinner was Lucifer, and that we may have a satanic nature. Now, that's a provocative statement that can't be true because we are not angels, therefore we can't have rebellious angelic spirit, but we are human, so we have a rebellious human spirit. And when I consider that I rebel just like the awful Prince of Darkness himself, it sobers me up a good bit. Sadly, I have grown to some degree too comfortable accepting my human rebellious nature, and I often mask that comfort by piously stating that I've grown to have profound faith in God's grace, which is true. But just as we developed a vaccine for polio, we should not lose sight of the horrors of the condition we have received the grace to overcome. And at this point in the live event, I show someone stricken with polio. If you're at all interested, you might look up something on the internet, perhaps, Google polio and then go to Google Images, and you'll see the unfortunate bent and hobbled condition of those dear souls. Well, next, let us consider what Ezekiel details, that Lucifer was covered in precious stones. Now, what gives precious stones their brilliance? Light. Lucifer was created to reflect the light of God's glory. Ezekiel 28:16 says, by the abundance of your trade you were internally filled with violence. The King James has abundance of your merchandising. Now, merchandising is the selling of goods for profit to the person at the point of sale. Now, if I go to a Chris Tomlin concert, Chris Tomlin's face is on the t-shirts, the books, the CDs, but the person or company tasked with manning that merchandise table is taking a cut of the profits. This is what Lucifer did. He began, if only even in his own heart, to believe that some of the glory that was occurring because of his role was indeed his, and began, by pride, to keep some of the glory, rather than reflecting it all to God. Now, to me, the key verse to understanding Lucifer's downfall is the one in Ezekiel. You corrupted your wisdom by reason of your splendor. As scriptures tell us that wisdom is actually fear of or reverencing the Lord. So Lucifer's wisdom got corrupt. Why? Because of his splendor, because of his glory. He saw the glory being reflected off of him. And also, which we'll touch on in a moment or two here, he had the ability to generate glorious music. And he began to be prideful. And that led to rebellion, which then led to the corruption of others. So a quick note here about Lucifer's ability to generate music, as the scripture indicates that he could. In the Hebrew, the word for settings is toph, which means timbrel, which is a musical instrument. Likewise, the Hebrew word for sockets is nekeb, and means pipes or grove or hole. Did you know that all analog instrumentation is either wind, string, or percussive in nature? Wind, string, or percussive in nature. So think about our own ability to create music. Singing involves wind, passing over strings, our vocal cords, and we can clap or slap. So just as Lucifer was able to create music for God's pleasure, so are we. But just as Lucifer was able to create music for his own glory, or to seduce and lead astray for his own purposes, so can we. Now, I could do an entire event on the satanic influence in even the most seemingly innocuous of music, and even give examples of how his twists and distortions of theology show up in certain praise and worship songs. An example I encountered during a season when I was a worship leader is there was a pastor that wanted to introduce a song that had the line in it, "You came to fix my broken life." But think about that. Is that really what Scripture tells us Jesus came to do? Or did he come to put us to death and raise us to new life in him? So anyway, I pointed this out, and an email discussion ensued, and in the end I was told that we had to do the song with the lyric, "You came to heal my broken life," which to me really isn't any better. So while I'm not an extremist believing that rock and roll is evil or anything that ever appeared on the top 40 is inspired by Satan, I absolutely know, both through study and the gift of discernment, that there is more music influenced by Satan than you'd be comfortable knowing.
Well, this ends lesson number 1, glory, the real issue. And next up is lesson number 2, spiritual warfare, made up or scriptural.